I'd never heard about it, so I didn't even know that was something we appointed somebody to, so, yeah, that's a great question, thing. I do want to put an amendment to this. I know we haven't, have we had a motion on this yet?
No.
So, I would make a motion with this caveat. And I understand that our new incoming chair has been very busy, but I have some issues with PSTA. And so our incoming chair has been on PSTA till she was termed out. We now have a new board member who has more knowledge about buses, scheduling, maintenance, and so forth than any of us could ever possibly have, no matter how long we served on the policy on buses. The other thing I have that I really didn't want to bring up publicly, but we haven't voted on these yet. She has been appointed to PSTA's executive committee and legislative committee, but she got appointments, which I think was overstepped to let PSTA know that her desire was going to be on there when we haven't voted on it. And so what I would like to do is, just so there's no miss, we've already had somebody come up and talk about it, you know, and you've got a full slate being chair, that PSTA, as long as Brian would be willing, would put Brian on PSTA, because I think it's an appropriate appointment given his knowledge of most of his lifetime. And I just think that it was kind of an overstep, and I just don't want to have that overstep kind of play into what's next. And that's just my personal feeling about it. And so I would make a motion with just that one change. If I could have a second on that, that would be great.
Is it appropriate for me
Commissioner
to
Long.
respond to that? So, Commissioner Peters, thank you for your input on whether or not, you know, everything has happened appropriately. I think I shared when I was trying to explain why we were making or trying to make appointments for the chair and the vice chair at our last official meeting, that the boards that we do have statutory responsibility to sit on are accustomed to making their turnover now. And I don't think there was anything nefarious at all about PSTA making the decisions that they did on their committees. It's just that they are already working on their legislative and their federal priorities. And those are some of the committees that I served on back then. I don't know if that would be the same going forward. But the reason, this is just my reasoning, the reasoning that I chose not to recommend Commissioner Scott for PSTA is because he is a new commissioner, and I totally agree with your reasoning that he does know more about buses, et cetera, than probably any of us here. That's not the issue. The issue is he has been recommended to serve on Forward Pinellas. Forward Pinellas, for those of us that have already sat on there, is a very complicated board with a lot of moving parts. And one of the things that I thought would be helpful to Commissioner Scott is learning all the intricacies of obtaining federal funding versus state funding, and that's an entire curriculum all on its own. I also am hopeful that he will agree to serve on the Waterborne Transportation Committee, which is a subset of Forward Pinellas. And it takes a lot of time and a lot of input in order to, that's a brand new concept for Tampa Bay, requires a lot of interaction with our regional partners, and I thought he would be very well suited with his personality and his interests to really wrap his head and his arms around that. And that's the kind of, you know, in-depth thought process that I went through as I made all of the different recommendations, clearly knowing that they were recommendations, that I was not yet the chair, and that remained to be decided. So if you all agree that you want to overturn that, that's your decision to make. These are merely recommendations.
Right, and I appreciate that, and I understand where you're going, but I think Forward Pinellas is PSTA is just part of it. And so, like, you served on Forward Pinellas, and PSTA, and they go together. So it just makes sense that those two would be together. And as far as PSTA's work going forward, you have two county commissioners that are on that board that represent that. And so it's not like they're short of votes or representation. I just thought it was inappropriate that we voted for something with you on the agenda as the executive chair and the legislative committee when we had not yet voted to put you there. And you don't currently sit on PSTA, and so I thought it was kind of inappropriate. And so just to remedy any inappropriateness that, and it's such a good fit. It's just a good fit.
Well,
So I just think it's a good fit. It's a good fit with Ford Pimentel's. So I would make a motion with that change, as long as Brian's willing to accept that change. I think it's a good fit for him. And you know, and as chair, you know, you got your hands full, and you know, so many other committees with TDC and so forth. I know you love PSTA. You've been able to serve on PSTA long enough to actually get termed out, and I just think it's time to start the new folks that are moving on. That, you know, and he served on PSTA before, so he already knows.
Peters, but with all due respect, one of the reasons that we have a good fit with me going back on PSTA is because we have a very large interest in pursuing another raised grant. And I already have that experience in DC, working with the folks in DC. And a new person, Commissioner Latvala, has been appointed to that as well. And I'm very confident with his experience in the legislature that he can come behind and embrace all of that function as well. So, and I do understand what you're saying. I'm not listening. I just would really, really appreciate it if we could leave the appointments the way they are for a variety of reasons. And I don't think it's appropriate to elaborate all of them right here, because there's a lot of moving parts with our regional partners. And you know how deeply involved I've been in trying to solve the regional issues. And we are on the cusp of a very huge decision to be made as it relates to one of our major partners.
We've got a couple other commissioners that want to weigh in.
Okay, I'm going to stop talking. I've made my point.
Commissioner Eggers.
Well, I like the motion. I think when before I was here, the commission that was in place had the wisdom to put Brian on PSTA with his background, his business background, and his knowledge of the industry. To me, he's been one of the best board members that was there. And then, you know, there was this commission that decided he shouldn't stay on that as our appointee, which I thought was a big mistake. I think it's a good opportunity for a person of his caliber and his background and his business acumen to be on that board. And so I would support that. But again, you know, really has to be about Brian and whether that's something he would like to do. So anyway, that's my comment.
Commissioner Latvala.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And to that point, can I ask Commissioner Scott if he'd be interested in serving on PSTA?
Commissioner Scott.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So I just want to clear one thing up. So does that mean Creative Pinellas is off the table? That's okay. So that's going. So I will serve on any board, any other board at the pleasure of this board. So I'm more than happy to serve on PSTA.
Can I ask a question?
Commissioner Flowers.
Commissioner Latvala, were you finished?
I'm sorry,
'Cause I
Commissioner.
saw you
Yes,
lean
ma'am.
up to say something else. If it can be said here, the reason that Commissioner Scott was removed before, does that concern still exist? We don't have to say whatever it is out here if it's not something to be aired, but.
I don't remember a concern. I remember there was another candidate that was selected. I don't think it was
Okay.
a slight on Commissioner Scott.
Okay,
As
I didn't
a-
know. That's why I was asking, because I wasn't here either.
It was a favorable response to the other applicant.
Okay, all right, thank you.
That's my memory.
I don't know. I was just asking, because if it was,
I
just wanted to make sure it was cleared up.
If I may.
Commissioner Long.
I have a question of our attorney. Is it a conflict for Commissioner Scott to serve on PSTA, Madam Attorney?
There is a bit of a history with this board's different people at different times, but this board's appointment of, at that time, private citizen, Brian Scott. I know that the first time this board appointed him, and I can't recall what year that was, I was not the county attorney that time. One of the issues that we looked at is a specific provision in the PSTA's special act that says that folks that are affiliated with, ownership of, a common carrier are not to serve on that board. And we did some research on that, and what ultimately happened at that time was the Board of County Commissioners were advised that as the appointing body, they could make the legislative determination as to whether they felt that was a conflict under the special act or not. At that time, they determined it was not, and appointed Brian as a private citizen at that time. The issue came up, as I recall, again, at the subsequent appointment. And I don't know that we had a discussion out here on the dais, but I certainly spoke with some of you all outside of a public meeting and told you that that was a legislative determination that had been made at the time, and that therefore it would be up to this board to rescind that legislative determination if they wish, but that it was not up to me to do so. So that was the discussion that was had back at that time. This is going off the top of my head, so if there's any interest in pulling some of those former documents or minutes of those meetings, I am happy to do so.
Commissioner Eggers.
Well, the fact of the matter is that there was, I don't ever remember any issue that when I was on PSTA that ever came to any discussion about there being a conflict, not regarding the investigation of the statute, or whatever you were referring to. But there was never a point, the only thing that he brought to the table was industry knowledge. The only thing he brought to the table was a worldwide trips and things that he could bring back to this board, to that board, excuse me, that only helped make the case. The real problem is that he represented a conservative or more conservative voice on the commission and didn't vote in favor of some of the budgets, in favor of some of the spending, in favor of some of that. And I think, frankly, I'm not going to start digging all that up, but I don't ever remember if somebody wants to bring out a specific situation where there was a conflict on a vote. I don't ever remember that even coming up, being asked about on the board, and certainly never having a recusal on a vote. So, and maybe there was before I got on there, but I think it's, the bottom line, I think he'd make a great appointee to that board, and he would serve as value added to our residents in this county in a big way. So that's my feeling. Thank you.
Commissioner Scott.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And just to clarify, in the 6 years that I served on PSTA, I was a volunteer appointment at that point. And PSTA, as you know, is not an insignificant volunteer appointment. I mean, it's a time-consuming job. I took it extremely seriously. I don't think I ever missed a single meeting the whole time that I was there. I never once had to recuse myself. My company does zero business with PSTA. And then just to, I guess, add an explanation point on that, I don't think that the voters believe it's a conflict of interest because I'm here. So, thank you.
Mr. Chair,
Commissioner Flowers.
I just want to be clear for me, and I'm not saying anyone said this. My comments have nothing to do with who said what or whatever was just stated. The only thing I wanted to get at was because I wasn't here, so I just wanted to know what the reasons were. But I will tell you that if there is something, because now I'm serving as Secretary-Treasurer for PSTA, so if there is something in their standing that addresses this, I would just like clarity on it before you're appointed so that it's clear, so that no one can say there's this, because I wasn't aware of that. So there's this information that says that persons who own or operate a transportation company or whatever cannot serve on PSTA. I was not aware of that, but if that is present, I would like for legal to speak with PSTA's legal department and kind of get that straightened out before you're appointed to a board that says something alternatively. I could care less about anybody's party on PSTA. I'm just worried about moving people rapidly, expeditiously, and safely through Pinellas County. But if that is something that they have in their paperwork, I would not want Commissioner Scott to be in a bad position because we made the appointment when there is something that addresses alternatively. So I don't know if you all would entertain us holding off the appointment, either Commissioner Scott or Janet, until that question can be asked and answered. I would hate for it to occur, he be put on, and then now he's gotta come off. So,
And
I don't know.
Attorney.
I will happily pull the paperwork. I can tell you at the time that this issue came up, and I can't remember what year it was. It's been quite a while. The position that PSTA's counsel took at the time was that this was a Board of County Commissioners appointment, and within your discretion, they were not going to weigh in.
Okay, well, if that's the case, then we can just move forward today. I missed that part, if you, if
And I
that's what you.
apologize, I didn't mention that.
Yeah, I'm
previously.
sorry, I apologize, because I didn't know that part. But again, I'm just trying to make sure we're doing things, that's appropriate.
Commissioner
so.
Peters.
Okay, well, she just answered that, so I don't have to say anymore. I don't think we need to wait, and so,
And I want,
How about, well, we have a motion and a second for this list of appointments with
that changed.
that one change.
And I would suggest also the elimination of Creative Pinellas as an appointment.
As well
And I
as
would change
JDI.
that to that
I'm
motion.
fine with that.
As well as JDI, because that doesn't exist. Juvenile detention assessment and intervention does not exist.
So I would amend my motion to include the elimination of J-Dye, Creative Pinellas, and that one change to put Brian on PSTA versus Janet.
And I'm fine with that as a seconder.
Further discussion? All right. Clerk will open the board. Commissioners will proceed to vote.
Someone's coming up.
Commissioner Flowers?
I need to be a voice vote.
No, you got there.
Did I get it?
Yeah.
You're up there.
Oh,
Commissioner Flowers?
Yes. Yes.
Passes unanimously. All right. All right.